Hello again. So here we are at chapter 10, and this chapter is discussing psychosocial development in middle childhood. Just to refresh our memories, middle childhood constitutes the ages of 7 to 11. One of the most important milestones in the middle childhood in terms of social development has to do with our self-concept. And there have been a lot of ideas on how children and people develop their sense of self, who they are, what separates them from other people, what makes them unique snowflakes, their strengths and weaknesses compared to others. And so some of those ideas have come from famous psychologists like William James. And William James believed that the self develops throughout the years as a child is exposed to different experiences and people. They start to kind of figure out who they are. Another psychologist by the name of Susan Harter believed that the self is really based on cognitive and social factors. So, unlike William James thinking that most of our self is dependent on social interactions, Harter believed that what we can understand and comprehend intellectually also affects our self concept. And then finally, we have Erik Erikson, who believed that the self is based on feelings of competence and a sense of achievement or failure. And so Erik Erikson seems to be one of the leading psychologists in this field. So we're going to look more deeply into his idea of how we develop self-concept. But first, let's get a good working definition of self-concept. So a self-concept is the image of oneself that develops from interactions with important, significant people in one's life. So significant people could be parents, co-workers, relationship partners, siblings, friends. And part of self-concept is comparing your old self with your current self and then kind of imagining what you want your future self to look like. And in doing that, we almost create what Erikson described as a real self and an ideal self. So the real self is our perceptions of our actual characteristics, traits, abilities, skills, intellect, personality traits. And the ideal self is the perception of who we wish we were, who we want to be, who we'd like to be, who we think we should be. And so Erikson said that the real self and the ideal self are often at a mismatch for people. They don't always line up perfectly. And so this mismatch can create anxiety. In fact, the further these two, the real self and the ideal self, are apart from each other, the more anxiety we will have. It also can create a distorted view of who we really are or an unattainable ideal self because of this mismatch. So, in other words, the mismatch can have us not be able to really be self-aware and see our strengths and weaknesses so well. And the mismatch can also cause us to have unrealistic expectations of how we should be. Maybe we have this unrealistic expectation that we should be good at everything that we do, for example. Let's watch a short clip on the developing self-concept in middle childhood.
Children show changes in their self-concepts with age. Preschool children like Todd and Christopher are likely to describe themselves in terms of physical characteristics, possessions, and behaviors.
I play in the dirt and I put cement and I make a building. My room has dinosaurs in it. The dinosaur room. Mine is a dinosaur room, and my mom's is a girl room, and my dad's is in the middle, and mine's on the left side, and my mom's on the right side. And I have a dog, cat, fish, hermit crabs, and some couches, 2 couches, and a big TV, and some toys that get lost behind the TV.
In middle childhood, children begin to describe themselves in less concrete terms. Like Rachel, Stephanie, and Ricardo, they may describe themselves in terms of group membership.
I'm 9, go to the Marlboro Intermediate School. My favorite color is purple. I'm in second grade, and I have one brother, and I like to go swimming.
I'm in the 4th grade. I'm 9 years old, and I go to the Western House.
In middle childhood, children also begin to describe themselves along more psychological dimensions, as illustrated by 7-year-old Joseph and 8-year-old Jenny.
Can you tell me 3 things about yourself?
I like school a lot,
Very good.
and I love art, and I like helping people.
Nice, smart, creative.
The next concept that we're going to discuss is self-esteem, and it is in fact different from self-concept, although they are interrelated. So self-esteem is really a person's evaluation of his or herself, and one of the ways that we make these evaluations is comparing ourselves to other people around us, which also then leads to our self-worth, how capable we think we are, how good we think we are, how deserving we think we are. So self-esteem and self-worth shape our personal goals. And they shape our personal goals by comparing our achievements and failures and characteristics with others. So for example, I was never good at history, especially when I compared myself to the other kids. I saw that they were really seeming to understand, and I was not really remembering the names and dates as well as they were. So it was never a personal goal of mine to be a historian, because I knew very early on that that was just not my cup of tea and not something I was very good at. But I was always in dance from the time I was 2, and I knew that I was really good at dance. And so when I compared myself to other kids that weren't in dance, I saw that maybe this is where I excelled. And so I continued on with a dance career for a significant amount of time. And so in middle childhood, children learn to identify their strengths and weaknesses, their desirable and undesirable qualities, and their evaluation of the self and development of self-esteem really depend on how they feel about a few different factors. One of which is their appearance. They feel that appearance is a determining factor in their self-esteem. And so in order to develop a self-esteem that's not just centered on appearance, we know that children need to have support from loved ones. They need people to tell them their good qualities and characteristics, especially people that are close to them, like parents or people that they trust. And they need to develop a sense of self-efficacy. So we want to make sure that we are putting our kids in situations where they can feel competent and capable. And all of these things should help to get the focus off of just appearance and more on one's actual talents, penchants, abilities, and traits. One of the determining factors in trying to measure how a child's self-esteem is progressing is looking at how competent they feel in a variety of different areas. When we talk about competence, then, we're really talking about a measure of children's level of self-esteem, specifically related to things like scholastic or athletic competence, peer popularity, physical appearance, and behavior. It's important in the development of a child's level of self-esteem that they do feel competent, hopefully in many of these areas or a few of these areas at least. And these 5 levels of competence are things that are important to the child. Children usually feel more competent in some of these areas and less in others. It's unusual for a child to feel competent in all 5 areas. However, if they do, that's great. Self-esteem is determined by which type of confidence the child thinks is important, and then if they are high or low in that specific area. For example, if a child thinks that physical appearance is very important to their self-esteem, and then they feel good about their physical appearance. Or if they think scholastic competence, doing well in school, is very important to their self-esteem, and then they are getting A's on a lot of exams and in classes and things like that, would lead to a higher self-esteem. If you don't see sports as important, for example, but you are good at them, it isn't going to have a profoundly positive impact on your self-esteem. So we need to see that relationship between what a person thinks is important and then them being good at that thing to see a self-esteem that's kind of high. Children who feel supported by important people in their life have self-esteem, and the leading factor in self-esteem at this age is actually having a positive opinion of your physical appearance, like we talked about earlier. So we can kind of think about why physical appearance is so important in the development of self-esteem for children. Psychologists have hypothesized that this is probably due to societal and cultural factors like the media. Overall, the relationship between self-esteem and competence is kind of like the chicken and the egg in terms of which one comes first. We did a study where we found that children who thought that higher self-esteem led to more people liking them, being more competent and evaluating their looks positively, had higher self-esteem. Whereas children who thought good looks, competence, and other people liking them led to higher self-esteem actually had lower self-esteem. In other words, children that knew that high self-esteem would lead to more high self-esteem, or high self-esteem / confidence would lead to people liking them and then believing in themselves and being more competent, actually did end up leading to higher self-esteem. So I guess it's important then to emphasize confidence and believing in yourself and self-esteem when we're working with kids. However, what do we want to do if we have a child that fails at something? For example, what would you tell a child that tries out for the basketball team but doesn't make it? Would you want to try to protect their little egos by saying to them, oh, you were just so good, everyone on the team was just jealous, that's why you didn't make it? Or do you want to be more honest with them? The truth is that honesty is the best policy. What we find in research is that when parents lie to children about their evaluations of them, for example, saying, oh, the tryouts were rigged, you were the best, but it was already predetermined who was going to make the team. These type of lies the children can sense, and they then start to lose trust in their parents, and this then affects their self-esteem because they don't really have a good sense of who they are and can't really evaluate themselves well, since the evaluations they've been getting are not trustworthy. So something that we might want to say instead to that child is, I'm really proud of you for trying so hard. You worked really hard. You were brave. You went out there. It's courageous to try out for something, and it's not a big deal. Now you know what you have to work on for next year to make the team. So we're just going to practice more and then try again next year. The next concept we're going to take a look at is the ability to self-regulate. Self-regulation is about using self-control appropriately in the right way in certain circumstances. And so self-control is really self-restraint exercised over impulses, emotions, and desires. Things like mastering fear, controlling eating, being able to keep your temper in check. When we make a conscious effort to regulate emotion, cognition, behavior, physiology, and the environment in response to specific events or circumstances, we are in fact self-regulating. One of the things that students often find interesting is that research shows that just controlling your physical reactions to emotions, when you're angry, taking a deep breath, and kind of getting yourself out of that fight or flight mode, can reduce or even get rid of that unwanted emotion. So this would be self-regulating, for example, breathing through anger, being able to control yourself so you don't lash out. But developing self-regulation does depend on a child's age and their maturity, their temperament, and their experiences. Role models, for example, if they grow up in a house with very impulsive or emotionally reactive parents, then they're not going to learn to self-regulate in those areas. Impulsivity is something that's studied heavily in child development because we find that children who have a lack of impulse control tend to do worse than children that have good self-control over their impulses. So impulsivity is a child's lack of ability to delay gratification. For people to have successful relationships, they have to have self-regulation. They have to know when to speak, know how to say things, know how to act, be aware if they are saying something that's hurting someone's feelings, and then regulate to make a change in their tone of voice or facial expression so they're no longer hurting that person's feelings. Because we can't just say whatever we want. One thing that we know in psychology is that our brain has a filter that inhibits us from saying socially unacceptable things to people, or at least is supposed to, because what we say to other people affects us, and it affects our survival, our adaptation in a Darwinistic type of way. If we were to tell our boss how we really feel about them and not use this filter, we could potentially get fired and then not have money coming in and then not being able to feed ourselves, etc. So it's very important to learn impulse control, and it's really something that we should learn during middle childhood. To not develop impulse control and the ability to self-regulate indicates immaturity and can affect our relationships well into adulthood if we never master it. We also find that people who are less impulsive and more reflective, kind of take a beat before they do something, think before they act, tend to have higher levels of achievement, both scholastic achievement, career achievement, and then, of course, a product of this is financial achievement. They tend to have greater emotional maturity and are more popular. And so the way that we discovered these results is through a very popular experiment called the marshmallow test. So let's go ahead and take a look at the marshmallow test.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
All right, so it's up to you. You can have it now or you can wait. Okay? I'll be back. Stay in the chair, okay? Okay. All right, so I'm gonna leave and then I'll come back, okay? So you can either eat it right now or you can wait. Either way, okay? Okay. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
So the kids in that study were actually part of a longitudinal study, so they were continued to be investigated throughout their life, and that's how we got those results about financial, career, educational success, popularity, relationship success, things like that. Specifically, in adolescence, the children who ate the marshmallow had more psychological problems. They had lower self-esteem. They were more irritable and aggressive. They had a hard time handling frustration. But the children who did not eat the marshmallow, when they were teenagers, we found that they handled frustration better, were more focused and calm when challenged, were more self-reliant and popular, and they got better scores on standardized tests like SATs, for example. So when we look at what makes kids more impulsive and not really having a great control or mastery of their emotions, one of the things that research shows us is that they suffer from what's called poor social information processing. They think that people are being mean to them when they aren't, people are giving them dirty looks when they aren't, and so this causes them to respond to those people in a negative way. In other words, they're taking in information about social interactions incorrectly, and this is then affecting their behavior. Okay, now let's go ahead and pause the video and head on over to Moodle to complete lecture activity 1, and then come right back here to resume the lecture. Let's take a look at how peers and friends can affect our social development in middle childhood. Peers are considered youngsters who are similar in age, usually within 12 months of one another. In middle childhood, peer interactions increase to about 30% of all interactions. Our peer groups get larger and adult-to-child ratios decrease, giving the child more independence in their interactions because they don't have that adult kind of hovering over them, watching what they're doing. And so they might start to have some freedom when engaging in emails or at school, interacting with their peers. We see that in this age, aggression changes to become more verbal and begins to include personal attacks, saying things like "you're stupid" or "you're ugly," specifically attacking someone's character or traits. We know that in this age, being accepted versus rejected is a big concern, and one of the things that happens is gossip. And so it's said that gossip really starts to facilitate the who's in and who's out process, who's cool, who's not cool. The development of cliques starts to occur, and people start to feel excluded and left out, or they start to feel included and popular or powerful. But we do find that peer rejection directly impairs children's adjustment. When they are spoken to negatively and excluded from social activities, this can have long-lasting effects on their ability to trust other people, be vulnerable with other people, and can lead to things like social anxiety well into adulthood. The next concept we're going to look at is friends. And so friends are defined as non-familial relationships that offer feelings of warmth and support. Children generally search for friends that are psychologically compatible with them. In other words, they perceive the world similarly to how they perceive the world. They have the same likes and dislikes. They have the same emotional maturity. And realizing that friends must adapt to one another's needs really marks a developmental milestone, showing healthy development. So when we kind of align ourselves with someone that's at the same emotional maturity as us or sees the world the same way we do, and then we're able to kind of empathize with them if they're having a hard day and adjust the way we're interacting with them on that day, maybe being extra nice to them. This would indicate healthy social development and something that we do want to see. So let's go ahead and take a look at what friendship looks like at different ages and in different cultures with this video.
During middle childhood, friendships in most cultures become increasingly important as children experience more socialization at school with children their own age. Friendships at this age continue to be based on selective association, of which gender is a big factor, and they also are based increasingly on trust. In a rural village in Botswana, 8-year-old Gracious attends 3rd grade at the neighborhood elementary school. She is bright and outgoing and is drawn to friends with similar characteristics, which is typical for children her age.
Who's the friend you like the most?
My best friend is Neo. I like the way she dresses and carries herself. Together, we do our homework, read, and play together. We played hide and seek at night with some of the kids from our neighborhood.
In rural Mexico, many children in this Mayan village do not attend elementary school because they are needed at home to work alongside their parents. 9-year-old Perla attends the 3rd grade and particularly enjoys the social environment of school.
Do you have friends, Perla?
Yes. I see them at school.
Are they boys or girls?
They are girls.
Perla's preference for playing with girls is very common at this age. Boys tend to play with boys and girls with girls. Studies have shown that boys generally engage in high-activity, aggressive, competitive play with their friends, whereas girls spend time in quieter, more cooperative play. Julie is a mother of 8, 7, and 3-year-old boys living in a suburb in the United States. She notices their style of play is very aggressive compared to their girl peers.
I have 3 very active, rambunctious at times, athletic boys. Life in my house with 3 boys, it's chaotic. Everything is done to keep the chaos to a minimum. I feel like my saving grace with the boys is that they do love athletics. With sports, you have a little bit of discipline, especially in football, and it's aggressive, and they love that.
In contrast to Julie's rough-and-tumble boys, both Gracious in Africa and Perla in Mexico play more imaginary games with their friends.
I enjoy playing house with my toys.
What toys do you have?
Dolls.
Who do you play dolls with?
With my sister.
And do you have friends who are boys?
Yes. I play more with the girls.
Why do you play more with the girls?
Because the boys push when we play.
The boys, they choose to play with boys. Our grade has a lot of boys in it, more so than girls. But in my family, they have mostly girl cousins, so they enjoy that too. It is just like a mini vacation if a girl is over. I mean, they just want me to sit up at our table, they sit down, they're like talking, there's no fist throwing, it's just really, really pleasant. Versus when boys come over and it's just, just how active can you be? What can we do? And it's just like a lot of running up and down the stairs, switching interest really, really quick.
Boys and girls don't play the same.
How do boys play?
Boys beat others. Girls play properly.
Unfortunately, another thing that we see start to emerge during middle childhood is bullying. So bullies are defined as cruel, bossy people who have aggressive reaction patterns and generally considerable physical strength, but physical strength is certainly not a requirement. Generally, we see bullying start around grades 6 through 10, and we have found through research that more than 1 in 3 children were either a bully themselves or were the victim of bullying. Usually, people are bullied about the way they look or the way they talk. Those are the 2 most common things people are bullied about. Studies show that victims of bullying tend to have lower self-esteem. They often have poor academic performance, depression, they can become violent or even suicidal. And so there's 4 major causes of someone becoming a bully. The first one is indifference by parents, maybe not really being cared after, paid attention to, neglected in some way, or just their parents are overly permissive. For example, one of the permissive behaviors we see in parents of bullies is that they're permissive of aggressive behavior. They might say to their kid that, if someone makes you mad, hit them. Or when they do observe their child hitting, they don't scold or punish them in any way or try to reshape that behavior. We often find that bullies come from parents who spank. And then finally, we see that generally bullies have a natural temperament that's more aggressive. So let's go ahead and watch a video on bullying and people's reactions and responses to witnessing someone being bullied.
Here we go. 3, 2, now. Yeah? Go, go, go. Okay. Yo, get over here. Get over here. Get in. Quiet. Get on the floor. Get on the floor. You want me to hurt you again? You want me to sock you in the face? Huh? Where's my paper?
I don't have it.
Where's my paper? Huh? Where's my paper?
Just let me go.
Huh?
Just let me go.
Where's my paper?
I'm sorry.
Sir? How you doing? How come you didn't help out? So I feel like a big issue in today's generation is bullying. Why does bullying continue, and why doesn't anybody put a stop to it? So I thought, let's put a crime and let it happen right in front of people's faces and see what they would do. Because of course, change starts with the people, right?
Yes, it does.
Let's go. Stop running away from me, yo. I'm gonna get you regardless, okay? I know where you live.
What do you want?
I want my paper, all right? By tonight. I want my paper by tonight or you're gonna get socked in the face. Do you hear me?
Let me go.
Do you hear me? You want me to sock you right now? Do you want me to sock you right now? I will.
Just let me
Stop. Get over here.
Please.
Get over here. Why didn't you do my paper?
I'm sorry.
Why didn't you do my paper? Stop. Stop.
Just let me
You
go.
want me to hit you?
No, I'm sorry.
What are you looking at?
Please.
You want me to hit you right now? You want me to sock you in the face?
Sorry,
Huh?
just let me go.
You want me to do what I did to you?
Let me go.
You want me to do what I did to you last time?
No.
Why didn't you do my paper?
I'm sorry. Just let me go.
Don't make a scene. Don't make a scene.
Let me go.
Do you want me to choke you out?
No.
I want my paper by tomorrow at midnight.
Sorry,
Stop.
please.
Stop.
I'm
Stop.
sorry.
Stop.
I'm sorry.
I want my paper by tomorrow, okay?
It hurt.
What are you doing? Huh?
Recording you.
What are you gonna do? Put it on World Star?
You're sure.
Why?
You bullying the guy.
Huh?
You bullying the guy.
Why does that have to do with you?
Because I'm on campus, I can't see anyone being like maltreated inappropriately.
You trying to get away, huh? You trying to get away? Huh? But what did I tell you? What did I tell you would happen next time? What did I tell you would happen next time, huh? What are you doing? Oh, sir. There's a camera right there. We're seeing what would happen in a bullying real life situation, and you did a great job right now, sir. You run away from me? No. You trying to run away from me? You want me to beat you up like I did last time, huh? Where's my paper? Where's my paper? My financial aid relies on you. You want me to sock you in the face right now? You want me to sock you in the face, really? You want me to do that again, huh? You want me to do what I did last time?
Wait, dude, stop. What are you doing?
Who are you?
You know him? I don't know, but I'm checking my email like that.
This is none of your business. Sit out of
I don't know
it.
who you are either, but can you leave him alone?
No, get out of my face.
No, you get out of my face. You're hurting this poor guy. I don't even know who the you are.
Get away from me.
I think you should leave. I think you should go. I don't know you, but I think you should go.
When your girlfriend isn't here, I'm coming back for you.
I'm sorry.
Huh?
I'm sorry.
Huh?
Let me
You
go.
want me to hurt you again?
No,
huh?
no.
You want me to?
No.
Huh? You want me to punch you right now? Huh? What would you do?
No. God. Sorry. Stop it.
So you're really not gonna help me with my paper?
No.
You're not gonna help me with my paper?
Just let me
huh?
go. No.
Huh?
I'm sorry.
You remember what happened last time?
Please.
Remember what happened last time?
Stop.
Huh?
Stop. No.
Why?
I don't want.
Are you gonna help me?
No. Just let me go.
Hey, everybody looking right now. There's a camera right there, and you guys just walked away from a guy getting brutally beat, and you guys did nothing to help him. To stop bullying in America, it would be really sincere and kind of you guys to try to do something to stop something like that at hand, instead of just walking away and acting like blind victims to something that's going on. I'm done with this video, yo. This is a joke.
I mean, I know I'm a very small girl, but honestly, when I just see any person hurting anyone, especially physically, like I have to step in.
He was about to get really hurt. I was about to beat him up.
I'm sorry, but I don't think that's my business since I don't really want to get in any trouble, so I'm so sorry about that.
What?
What's going on here?
What is it to you?
What is it to me?
Yeah.
Someone's beating up somebody else in my university? That's not something to me.
Is it your problem?
Yes, it is.
Can I tell you something? We just wanted to see what would happen in this kind of predicaments. The camera's right there. Please don't kill me because you're scaring me right now. How did that make you feel?
Horrible.
Yeah?
Horrible.
How come you didn't want to jump in and try anything?
I was about to if you continued.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Huh?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just let me go.
Excuse me? Excuse me? Can I tell you guys something real quick? Turn it back to me. Turn it back to me. Why bullying occurs in America? Because people like that don't stop it when they see it happen right in front of their eyes.
That was the weirdest response ever. Can I talk to you? No.
Did you catch it all?
As you know, school doesn't just teach us mathematical facts or facts about history. While it does that, it gives us general information and knowledge. It also teaches us a variety of other skills that we use throughout our lives. In one study, the psychologist by the name of Rudder found that good behavior and academic success also depend on the school. So we know that better schools tend to emphasize academic success. Teachers will clearly set expectations of the students. They effectively use rewards and punishments. They provide comfortable, warm environments. And they do insist responsibility on the part of the student. An optimal learning experience does require good instructional leadership, and the culture of the school is set by the teachers, the principals, the parents, the proctors, anyone who works at the school. And so we want to see these leaders create an orderly environment and encourage parents to be supportive. As I mentioned earlier, schools affect development more than just intellectually or academically. At school, children learn how to get along with others, they learn how to work with diverse groups of peers, and they are allowed and enabled to assess their self-concept through competition by comparing themselves with others to determine their level of competence at those factors we had discussed earlier. So, we're going to now watch a video on a school who seems to be really doing a great job at teaching kids ways to develop healthy social and emotional skills. So let's take a look at what that school is doing.
Swine flu snake greeting. Morning, 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 morning.
At Carithers Middle School, the day begins with goofy games, which are often followed by serious discussions.
Okay, we've been discussing bullying all week long.
The 20 minutes spent in this daily morning meeting is a critical component of Jefferson County, Kentucky's district-wide Care for Kids initiative, which seeks to build positive, caring learning communities.
There's a pretty complex puzzle that we have to put together to have a successful school. But a foundational element of that puzzle is the culture and climate of that school. And when students feel safe,
hello, sweet girl, you have a good day, okay?
When they feel that that culture and climate supports them, when they feel cared about not only by the adults in the school, but by other students in the school, they can do their best.
Look at the name and think of something nice to say about that person.
Good morning, Storm.
Good morning, Deidre.
I like your humor.
It isn't touchy-feely stuff. It's core social skills that gives students the experience and the knowledge to work effectively with others.
Thanks for always being nice.
It's teaching kids how to care for one another, how to be a bigger person, and how to resolve conflicts. When the cold wind blows, it blows for whoever has on shoes.
Oh!
When you give us activities where we're able to move, get all our noises out before school and stuff, it gets us more hyped about learning.
Less instructional time is lost because we're teaching the skills up front, and so that when it is time for academics, we're learning and we're not stopping at various times to address conflicts, and it's teaching the students how to have ownership and have voice.
Tell Jasmine what you think is special about her.
I like when you share with me. Thank you, Caroline.
They're excited, they want to be here. I've had parents say, you know, my daughter's sick today, but she cried because she really wanted to come to school. You know, what are you all doing?
Thanks for filling my bucket.
How did they fill your bucket today, Jasmine?
Because they was being nice to me.
Stay alive, don't run, don't run. I like this program, and I see this program that's been implemented, and it works because I was here, and I seen it for myself. See you tomorrow, okay, buddy? At the end of the day, those kids getting on those buses with a smile on their face. My job is done. I can safely go home and say, you know what? When they came this morning, they had smiles. And when they left, they had smiles. Our job is done because I'm caring. Your mom's outside. Your mom's right there, Madison.
For more information.
So is it important for our kids to engage in extracurricular activities? Activities that happen before and after school, hanging out with family members, hanging out with sitters, being around other people and involved in different programs prior to or after school. Well, what research finds is yes, it is important and can have a positive effect on the child's development. One study found that kindergartners and first graders that were in extracurricular activities scored higher on cognitive tests than those that were not. We also know that playing sports, for example, leads to better problem-solving scores, academic achievement, social competence, learning to work with others. So we find that children who engage in these extracurricular activities tend to develop in a very healthy way. In elementary school, which is what children are usually in during this age group, they face challenges of achievement and competition in a pretty overt way for the first time. They're really able to get a realistic look at how they compare to other people. And so this affects the way that they learn, this affects their self-esteem, this affects their level of self-efficacy and competence. And so it's really important that we do make sure we put kids in activities that they can shine in and that they can feel good about themselves in. So let's take a look at television and how it affects the cognitive development in children that are in the age group of middle childhood. So children between the ages of 2 and 11 years old watch 23.4 hours of TV a week on average. And television has a greater effect on development than any other form of media. For example, video games or social networking, for example. So one of the problems that we see with television watching is that the cognitive structures that children create through play or what their parents have taught them can be altered by what they see on television, because children do tend to learn and remember what they see, and they can and do apply these concepts shown to them on television into their life. The good news is that television tends to have little impact on vocabulary and creativity, so it doesn't hurt, but it also doesn't really help those areas either. We know that watching TV more than 30 hours a week does tend to interfere with academic achievement, however. So let's go ahead and take a look at TED Talk. It's pretty lengthy, but it does give really great insight into how specifically television affects the cognition abilities within the developing brain.
I am a pediatrician, a researcher, and a parent, and I became those things in that order. And the reason the sequencing is important is because even though I was a doctor who took care of children for a while, and I was a researcher who studied ways to keep them healthy, it wasn't until I became a parent that I got interested in, some might even say obsessed with, early learning. It was 14 years ago when my son was born, and I took a month paternity leave to be with him in his 3rd month of life. And now, in retrospect, as a pediatrician, I should have known better because I opted for the time when colic crescendos. And I spent that month with him in a snuggly, bouncing on a big blue ball and watching more daytime television than I have in my life, and noticed that he was actually interested in it. As much as I like to believe that my 2-month-old was following CNN as closely as I was, it was obvious to me that he wasn't, and yet something about that experience was important to him. Now, why do these early experiences matter? The typical newborn brain is 333 grams. And in the first 2 years of life, it actually triples in size. It's an extraordinary period of brain growth, unparalleled over the life course. And you can see that here. Here is brain growth over the lifespan. And you can see how steep the rise is early on. And it continues to grow until about age 20. And I'll let you guys in the audience find yourselves over on the right there and see why you had such a hard time finding your car keys this morning. Now, we're actually born with a lifetime supply of brain cells or neurons. That's not what actually grows. It's the connections between those brain cells, what we call synapses, that account for that brain growth. And those synapses form based on early experiences. If you will, the mind is fine-tuned to the world that babies inhabit. And to give you an example of that you can all relate to, any child born anywhere in the world can learn to speak any language fluently. But if she isn't exposed to certain sounds early in the first few years of her life, she can learn to speak another language later, but she'll never sound like a native speaker. So a baby born today in mainland China, as amazing as it is, can learn to speak fluent Mandarin. But if she doesn't hear English sounds early in her life, she can learn to speak English later. But as we all know, we know such people, she'll struggle making certain sounds. It wasn't because she wasn't born with that capacity. It was because her early experience didn't condition her mind to learn them. Now, this graphic actually shows just that. What you see is the brain, and you see the neurons and the synapses connecting them. We're born with about 2,500 synapses. By age 3, we have 15,000. And then over time, those connections are actually pruned in response to the external stimulation, the external world that we live in. Now, to give you another example of that, this is the breathing pattern of a 1-day-old infant listening to music. And you can see here that he's listening to Mozart, and then Stravinsky is put on, and then Mozart again. Now, I show you this not to present some kind of an infantile critique of classical music, but and those of you in the audience who are classic music aficionados might have a hypothesis about why Stravinsky did this to his breathing pattern. But the point is that even at 1 day of life, there's a discernible physiological reaction to what babies are actually hearing. Now, we know from decades of research that too little stimulation early on is bad for brain development. I show you here 2 PET scans. Now, PET scans are measures of brain function. The brighter colors show more brain activity. And on the left is a PET scan of a normal kindergartner. And on the right is a PET scan of a child who was raised in a horribly neglected environment. This is actually a PET scan from a child who was raised in a Romanian orphanage and was profoundly neglected early in life. And you'll notice that there are areas of his brain that show no activity at all. It didn't develop as a result of too little stimulation. Now, this is a horrific example of too little stimulation and the untoward consequences of it. But the question we've had in our lab for some time is, what about too much? Is it actually possible to overstimulate the developing brain, or more appropriately, to inappropriately stimulate the developing brain in ways that are actually not beneficial but harmful? And this is important because we're technologizing childhood today in a way that's unprecedented. In 1970, the average age at which children began to watch television regularly was 4 years, like this cute little girl here. And today, based on research that we've done, it's 4 months. It's not just how early they watch, but how much they watch. The typical child before the age of 5 is watching about 4.5 hours of TV a day. That represents as much as 40% of their waking hours. Which brings us to Baby Einstein. Now, many of you probably have not seen Baby Einstein, but I will show you a random 20-second clip from Baby Einstein Day on the Farm, and here it is. In that 20-second clip, there were 7 scene changes, about 1 every 3 seconds. It's about the most exhausting day on the farm since John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. And of course, it's nothing like being on a real farm, right? Adults watching this find it discombobulating because your mind is trying to make a coherent narrative out of this, and there is no coherent narrative. It jumps all over the place. But babies aren't trying to make a coherent narrative out of it. They're not capable of doing that. It's all of that screen change, all of that stimulation that's keeping them actually engaged in the screen. So we've had for a while what we call the overstimulation hypothesis, which is that prolonged exposure to this rapid image change during this critical window of brain development would precondition the mind to expect high levels of input, and that would lead to inattention in later life. So you watch enough Baby Einstein Day on the Farm as a baby, and when you go to a farm as a school-age child, it's boring. It's too slow. How come there's no sheep suddenly popping into my face? How come there's no marionette going back and forth? Why do I have to walk from here to there? That's the general idea, that you're conditioning the mind to that reality, which doesn't actually exist. And we tested this some years ago, and what we found was that the more television children watched before age 3, the more likely they were to actually have attentional problems at school age. Specifically, for each hour that they watched before the age of 3, their chances of having attentional problems was increased by about 10%. So a child who watched 2 hours of TV a day before the age of 3 would be 20% more likely to have attention problems compared to a child who watched none. Now, what else did we find? We found that the more cognitive stimulation children received, and we measured cognitive stimulation in terms of how often parents read to their child, how often they took them to the museum, how often they sang to them, we found that cognitive stimulation reduced the chances of attentional problems later in life. In fact, each hour of cognitive stimulation reduced them by about 30%. So if you will, these are two sides of the same coin. There's certain things that we can do early on in our children's lives that enhance their ability to pay attention, and certain things that we can do early on that actually impede them. Now, if our hypothesis was right, that it's based on the pacing of the programs, and you might imagine that what children watch actually is important. And so content would be key. And I'll give you 2 examples of content to illustrate that point. The first is the Powerpuff Girls movie, the right mix of sugar and spice for a satisfying rush. I don't know how many of you have seen that, but here's a scene from that. Okay, so that was, again, you can see a lot of rapid sequencing. In fact, this was the first movie that was ever rated PG for non-stop frenetic animated action. I'm not making it up, that's the back of the box there. Now, I want to contrast that with something that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Really needs no introduction, but this is a clip from Mr. Rogers for you to watch.
Hi, Odd.
Oh, hi,
How are you?
Fred. I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thanks. I brought my television neighbor to see what a restaurant was like.
Oh, I'm so glad. Can I show you a table?
Certainly.
I'm awfully busy today. One of the waitresses is ill.
I see.
So I'm sort of doing double duty. How about this?
This is fine. Thank you
Grand.
very much.
Sit down and I'll be right back.
All right. Now, when you come to a restaurant, usually somebody shows you what table you're supposed to sit at. And one of the first things you do is to put your napkin either on your lap or up here. And then, well, this is the way a table is set.
So, Fred Rogers invented reality TV. He's not credited with it. Actually, it's not reality, right? It's even slower paced than reality. The waitress says, "I'm awfully busy," but she doesn't seem the least bit hurried. So you can see that there are very, very real differences in pacing. And when we followed up our study with a subsequent experiment to look at what children actually watch, what you see is that educational programs like Mr. Rogers pose no increased risk of attentional problems. Entertainment programs like the Powerpuff Girls movie increase the chances by about 60%. And violent programming, which I didn't show you, increases it even by more than 100%. And violent programs are typically even more rapidly sequenced. Now, in the last year, we've been building actually a mouse model of television viewing in my lab. And you are now watching mouse TV here. The sounds are from the Cartoon Network, and the lights are basically photorhythmically generated by those sounds. This is what it looks like. These are the TV lounges here that the mice live in. And they have speakers above and lights around them. And what we do is we start about 10 days of life, and these mice watch TV 6 hours a day for 42 days. It's basically their entire childhood spent in front of a television, which is not uncommon these days for some children even. And then 10 days later, we actually assess their behavior in a few ways I want to show with you. The first test we do measures their activity and risk-taking. Now, we do what's called the open field test. Now, mice have two kind of competing instincts. You'll see them here. One is to avoid being in the middle of anything, because, of course, mice have very few friends, and being in the middle of this open field is risky. But, of course, they have a competing instinct to forage for food. So at some point, they do need to go into the middle and explore their environment. Now, we put these mice in here and test them, and we exploit the fact that it's a white mouse on a black background. And with a computer above, we can actually track their movement. And you can see on the left is sort of a normal mouse spending most of its time around the perimeter. But look at the one on the right. Notice how much time it spends in the middle, but also notice just how much general activity this mouse is actually exhibiting. So this is both a hyperactive and a risk-taking mouse. And when we look at our overstimulated compared to our control mice, we find that the overstimulated mice spend more time in the center, and they enter the center more than the regular mice do. The next test we do is what's called the novel object recognition, and this tests short-term memory and learning. We put a mouse in a box with two objects, and the mouse will explore both of them, get to know them, if you will. And then we take the mouse out, and an hour later we replace one object with a novel object. And we see how much time the mouse spends on each object. Now, the mouse that is learning, that has good short-term memory, will spend more time on the novel object. And you can see that here, as opposed to the one on the right, which is spending the same amount of time with both objects. And what did we find? Well, we found that our control mice, our normal mice, spent 75% of their time with a novel object. But look at what our TV viewing, our overstimulated mice did. They spent the exact same amount of time. It was as if they couldn't distinguish the two objects or they didn't care. But one way or another, they were not learning. They were not acting like normal mice. Now, I want to talk a little bit about a study we did with children. It's a building block study. It was a randomized trial here in a low-income clinic in Seattle. We took 200 children who were 18 to 24 months of age, and we gave half of them blocks at the beginning of the study and half of them blocks at the end. And their parents got what we call blocktivities monthly. These were ways to play with your children with blocks. Sort the blocks, stack the blocks, count the blocks. Really simple things that come naturally to a lot of parents, but what a lot of low-income parents don't do with their children regularly. And here's what happened. The children who got the blocks, 59% of them played with them on a typical day, as opposed to 13% who didn't get the blocks initially. They played for about 20 minutes a day, about 1.5 episodes a day, and about 65% of the time was with their parent. And then 6 months later, we assessed their language. And see on the right here that the kids who got the blocks late scored in the 42nd percentile, which is below average, but unfortunately not uncommon in low-income populations in Seattle and, for that matter, around the world. And the kids who got the blocks, they actually scored at 56th percentile. Significantly better and slightly above average. So promoting that kind of interactive play actually promoted language development in these young children. So I want to conclude by impressing on you that early childhood is very important for children and for mice, and it's critical to their development. And we need more real-time play today and less fast-paced media, particularly for young children. It's vitally important that we have that, because if we change the beginning of the story, we change the whole story. Thank you very, very much.
There's been a lot of talk recently in the media about the relationship between violent television and violent video games and aggressive behavior in children. 3,500 studies have actually looked at this relationship, and only 18 of them did not find a relationship. So generally we're finding that violent video games and violent TV is correlated with aggressive behavior in children. Does that mean it causes aggressive behavior? No, certainly not. But it means that it's one of the factors that can contribute to violent behavior. In addition to maybe having been the victim of bullying or depression or a home in which there's domestic violence. The effects of viewing televised violence are more intense for children than they are for adults, however, because adults are able to kind of make sense of the violence and know that that's ketchup and not blood. But for children, they're not desensitized to this type of violence yet. So it's very profound in terms of how it impacts their brain development. One of the things that we are concerned about in psychology is this idea of desensitization. That as children watch more and more violence, it seems more and more normal or less profound. And this can lead children to lose the ability to tell the difference between reality and fantasy in terms of violence. Let's take a look at a clip on the effects of violence in film and television on children.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
Film and television can have a significant influence on the meaning, spirituality, and identity of the students in our classroom. In our day-to-day routine, the television is often the first thing switched on in the morning and the last thing switched off at night. Television and film have become such a prominent part in our modern-day lives that their potential influence needs to be addressed by both parents and educators. The power of observational learning has long been associated with the effects of media violence. Children spend an average of about 40 hours per week with various types of entertainment media, and more than half that time is devoted to watching television, videotapes and DVDs. Studies have demonstrated that youngsters are exposed to an astonishing amount of violence when they watch TV. The National Television Violence Study, a large-scale study of the content of network and cable television shows conducted in 1994 to 1997, revealed that 61% of programs contained violence. 44% of violent actors were enticing role models, the good guy. 75% of violent actions occurred without punishment or condemnation. And 51% of violent actions were sanitized as they featured no pain. It's been estimated that the typical child has vicariously witnessed 8,000 murders and 100,000 other acts of violence on TV by the time he or she finishes grade school. Story and narrative are important in the development of children. It gives us the thread to help us construct meaning and piece together our own personal story whilst drawing on facets of cultural stories. Traditional stories handed down from family, home, religion, school and culture are basic sources for what helps us to shape our values and images of life. Nowadays, the stories and narratives from film and television are superseding these traditional stories. Rather than growing up in homes where elders told most of the stories, today, television is the biggest storyteller. The overall aim for educators is to help students to give more thought to the way that the cultural elements in film and television enter into their lives. This will hopefully allow and encourage students to eventually watch television and film with a more critical and discerning eye. By enhancing students' critical interpretation, we are educating our students to be more informed and to theorise about the potential influences of issues they are exposed to as a television and film audience. Hundreds of experimental studies of the short-term effects of media violence consistently demonstrate that an exposure to TV and movie violence increases the likelihood of physical aggression, verbal aggression, aggressive thoughts and aggressive emotions in children and adults. In short, these studies show that the more violence children watch on TV, the more aggressive the children tend to be at home and at school. Do you recognise this woman? How about this guy? You may never have bought one of her albums or listened to his radio show, but whether you like them or loathe them, you know who they are and you know what they stand for. The point is, we cannot control the exposure our children have to film and television, so as educators we need to empower our students to become inquiring, critical evaluators of culture. Through this empowerment, our students will become better informed, more discerning, and less naive about the influence of film and television on people's values and behaviour.
Okay, let's take a look at stress and the effect that it has on children. Stress is defined as anything that upsets a person psychologically and physiologically. People are more successful in dealing with stress and anxiety if in their childhood their needs were met. So when we refer to needs, we often take a look at a theory created by Abraham Maslow. And so you can see on the slide here Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And he says that we all have these 5 basic needs. And these needs need to be met in this order, starting at the bottom, working up to the top. The idea as it relates to children is that if their lower level needs are not met, then this produces a lot of stress. So the lowest level need is physiological needs, and this is the need to satisfy hunger, thirst, fatigue, just our primary needs that we have in order to survive and function. For example, we know that children who don't eat breakfast experience low levels of energy and have a harder time concentrating in class. The next need are our safety needs, and so children and all of us have a need to feel secure and safe and out of danger. If a child is a victim of verbal, sexual, physical abuse by parents, adults, peers, or if they're living in an unsafe neighborhood, if there's a lot of financial burden like poverty, all of this can create stress, anxiety, and insecurity in the child. The next need that we all have is belongingness and love. We need to be with other people, and we need to be accepted and feel like we belong to a group or a family. Children are no exception to this. They need to feel wanted and accepted. If not, we see that they generally have low self-esteem and often engage in inappropriate or risky behavior to get attention, promiscuity, drug use, criminal activity. The next need, which are more higher order needs, are esteem needs, which is the need to achieve, to be competent, to gain approval and recognition. And children have these esteem needs as well. We know that good self-esteem leads to a desire to excel, to get praise and rewards, And when we do have those praise and rewards, and when we are excelling, this all just keeps this cycle of motivation going, where we want to keep excelling and doing well, and our self-esteem just gets progressively better. And so we do want to be praising and rewarding our kids then. The final need, which is at the top of the pyramid here, is often not reached. It's seldom reached, in fact. And this is when people have sufficiently satisfied their lower needs and achieved their full human potential. We feel restless and tense as adults if we aren't being all that we think we can be, if we're not working up to our potential. So while no one is arguing that children can become self-actualized, because we've never seen that before, and based on what we know about the developing brain and the developing child, that's probably not possible. But we still can direct children towards being authentic and finding their passion and finding meaning, engaging in hobbies, things that they enjoy that make them feel creative and self-sufficient, so that hopefully as adults they can be on this path already towards self-actualization. Okay, so to help children cope with stress, what we need to do is talk to them, listen to them, give them as much detail about whatever situation is stressing them out that they can handle. You have to keep it kid-friendly, not too much information or information that's over their head, but just the right amount. And you want to make sure that you're asking questions along the way to make sure that you're not giving them too much information. So for example, if you were going through a divorce, you'd want to give them an appropriate amount of information and check in with them by questioning if they are understanding how they feel about it, so you know that you're not overwhelming them. When children are stressed, you want to give them advice. You don't really want to let them internalize that stress. In other words, blame themselves, feel like failures, think things are their fault, or that they're a bad person. You want to encourage them to express themselves while providing your undivided attention. You can't be texting while the child is pouring their heart out to you, obviously. You want to assure them that home, school, friends, these are safe places, these are comfortable places, these are friendly places, and so when they're at those places, they don't have to feel stressed out, they can feel a little alleviated in terms of anxiety at those locations. We find that children that are anxious tend to encounter 4 main problems. They find it harder to calm themselves in stressful situations. They find it harder to use their intellect and creativity. Children that are anxious become discouraged and have feelings of helplessness, and they have a hard time accepting their success. Children react differently in the face of stress depending on 3 main factors, and those factors are sex, age, and temperament. In terms of sex, we see that boys are more vulnerable to stressful events because people try to shelter girls more from stress, and they don't really shelter boys as much from stress. They tend to be less sympathetic to the signs of emotional distress in boys than they are to the signs of emotional distress in girls. In terms of age, under 6 months, children can't recognize stress. Between 2 and 6, they tend to blame themselves for all the stress because of that egocentrism we talked about earlier. And between the ages of 7 and 11, they begin to be exposed to more stressors as they become more independent. But they are able to handle it better than early childhood generally. And then the last factor that affects how children react to stress is temperament. So the manner in which the child interacts with the environment affects their level of stress. For example, if their temperament is more impulsive versus more reflective, they're going to have more stress. Okay, I'd like you to pause the video here and head on over to Moodle to complete lecture activity 2, and when you're finished with that, resume the lecture at this point. In 2004, there were a reported 152,250 confirmed victims of child abuse. But it's said that child abuse is much more rampant than that. It's just that many victims do not report any child abuse. So what is child abuse? Of course, physical marks constitute child abuse, but there is really no universal, legal, or scientific definition because there are many forms. But the definition that our textbook uses is the infliction of injury to a child, commonly including physical, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and neglect. Abused children are more than 4 times more likely to develop personality disorders like sociopathy, narcissism, borderline personality disorder by the time they are in early adulthood. So let's take a look at these different types of abuse. The first type is physical abuse, which is non-accidental physical injury to a child. Sexual abuse, any sexual activity between a child and adult, either by force or consent, because a child does not have a brain that is developed enough to consent to any sexual activity. So there really is no such thing as child consent. Many abused children have been abused more than once, and often by the same abuser. Most sexual abusers of children are male, and 1/3 of the victims know their attacker. Many children blame themselves for the attack or feel distressed about finding the actual touching physically arousing. I remember listening to Oprah one time, who was the victim of molestation herself, talking about how horribly guilty she felt because her body was responding naturally as it should when it's being sexually aroused, and the sexual part of the molestation to her felt pleasurable because the body is wired to feel pleasure when the genitals are aroused. However, emotionally and psychologically, it was terrorizing and traumatic. But this kind of cognitive dissonance or inconsistency between what her body and mind were telling her made her feel very guilty, responsible for the sexual abuse. And that's something that we see a lot of victims struggle with. But in no way is it their fault, or do they need to feel guilty if their genitals are responding as they are wired to do. There's really nothing that you can do to prevent that from occurring. And then emotional maltreatment is, or emotional abuse, is ridiculing, directed hostility, verbal put-downs, for example, telling someone they're worthless, name calling, intentional confusion, saying things like you don't make sense. And then the last type of abuse is neglect, and this is just a lack of care. Not providing food, not providing clothing, not providing what the child needs to thrive. Let's go ahead and take a look at a video of about child abuse, about the incidence of it, the causes of it, signs of it, things like that.
Having lost my mom at age 8, I was immediately put in a foster home where I was being forced to eat dog food to live. I had to wake up at 4 every day to clean up the backyard and to clean after the dog. And if any poop was left, I had to eat it.
I remember growing up in a house full of hatred. My parents fought all the time, and when my mom left for work, that's when I would enter a world of hell.
I couldn't tell anybody. I was just scared to getting hit more, which at times seemed like that couldn't happen because I was so numb to the pain.
My father was a drug addict and a very angry man. He was in charge of watching over me, and when I say in charge, I mean in charge.
I was made to hit my siblings. They were the ones who beat me. My life consisted of just focusing one day at a time and wondering what was going to happen to me.
They say don't cry over spilt milk. Well, my dad would beat me over spilt milk. He threw a rag on the floor, called me a piece of shit, and proceeded to make me clean the floor.
I came to a point where I had to pretend to cry, or my abuser were going to keep on hitting me, because I couldn't feel the sting anymore.
He pushed and shoved me until the point I refused to do it. He then proceeded to grab me by the neck and choke me, putting me against the wall and slapping me. I didn't even cry, because I knew if I did, he would only hurt me more.
Let's take a look at the characteristics of abusive parents. The number one characteristic is that the parents are victims of abuse in childhood themselves. Also, we find that abusive parents tend to be loners. They don't have any other friends generally. A refusal to recognize the seriousness of the child's condition. Another characteristic that we see often with abusive parents is that they resist diagnostic studies. They won't take their child to the doctor, for example. They often believe in harsh punishment. They set unreasonable expectations of the child, like the child should never cry or spill, for example. Abusive parents often lack control, are immature, and are dependent on other adults, family members, friends, sometimes even the child that they're abusing. Finally, abusive parents often feel personally incompetent in some avenue of their life, at work, in relationships, or even as parents. Okay, this concludes Chapter 10. Head on over to Moodle to complete the journal and forum assignments, and then we shall see you here for the next chapter. Have a good day.